13 minutes into The Godfather, we are introduced to Michael Corleone, and over the next 2 3/4 hours, we watch him become a very different man.
That Corleone.
When we first meet him, he is idealistic, ambitious, morally strong, and resentful of his family's business, if not his family itself.
That's my family, Kay. It's not me.
He has an ultimate familial love for them, but definitely not a love for what they do. And over the course of the film, we watch the changing relationship with his family, as he takes on a love of what he do, as he finds the power associated with it. The Godfather's character development follows one simple rule. Although actions may change, character remains constant. They behave differently as new elements are added to the equation, but ultimately, they're the same person at the beginning of the film as they are at the end. And this is true for the entire movie, but before we discuss the end, let's take a look into Michael at the beginning of the movie. When we first meet Michael, he is the hero of the story. Don't interpret this next thing to be a bad thing, but his backstory is left intentionally vague. After meeting him, we know very little about him. He's a veteran returning from war, he's a war hero, and we know that his family has the power to get him out of the service, but he chooses to serve his country. We also know that he looks down on the crime empire his family runs. I think it would be safe to assume that the latter fuels the first. He chose to serve, knowing that it would, in some ways, affect his family negatively. He was raised in an environment where family is everything. That's what his father believes, and that's what he was raised to believe. And that still means something to him. At the same time, his love for Kay, at least at first, appears to be a priority over his family. I feel like this scene acts as a perfect microcosm of the character's relationship with the two. At first, Kay is quite literally out of the picture, but Michael refuses to be a part of it unless she is in it.
Wait a minute.
Without trying to speculate too much, I think it would be safe to say that Michael is trying to leave behind his family so that he can be with Kay, someone who he loves for who she is. The biggest thing that we learn about Michael early in the movie is that he is level-headed and calm, and this is where he is most similar to his father. Listen to how he describes something he adamantly disagrees with.
Luca Brazzi held a gun to his head, and my father assured him that either his brains or his signature would be on the contract.
Michael resents this, but he isn't angry about it. He, unlike his brother Sonny, knows that in order to have true power, you need to remain calm and level-headed. He understands the true nature of power, to be calm and calculating and well thought out, not instinctive. What begins his descent from this noble character into the villain of the film is action into which he is forced. First, he must take an active role into the family business after his father is shot. Michael is forced into taking a more active role within his family. Going off of the previous point, I think it's worth noting that he was with Kay when his father was attacked. He begins it merely as an assistant, barely involved at all with the crime.
Maybe we shouldn't get Mike mixed up in this too directly.
But given his part in the family, that role slowly starts to escalate. While all this happens, outside factors are forcing him to take actions that he must take. I feel like the moment where he turns bad is pretty obvious, committing cold-blooded murder. But I think even more important than that is when he's attacked by the officer when visiting his family. This is when he realizes that he needs to take action. It forces him to see just how powerful the forces of antagonism working against him are. If he wants to preserve his family, he is pushed to the extreme, to match what others around him are doing.
Then I'll kill them both.
Earlier I mentioned that unlike Sonny, Michael isn't instinctive, he remains calm and level-headed, but unlike Tom Hagen, he is someone who is willing to take action. He knows what must be done in order to achieve anything. He proves that when the situation is dire, he is willing to push himself to his most extreme. But Michael's character arc isn't about him going to the extreme, it's about him becoming a villain. I should mention that he's still the protagonist of the story, but his character's arc is very unconventional. It isn't him redeeming himself, it's quite the opposite. It's him going down a very dark pathway. When he kills Sollozzo, he is pushed to the extreme, and it's a significant part of his character development. However, it isn't when he becomes a villain. I think that happens through his relationship with Kay. His morals start to chip away once he is exposed to power. He sees the impact that he can make and wants it to not just be in his business, but also in his life. He really changes when he is in Italy. Anything he felt for Kay was replaced with a new love, his love for power, and he was exposed to it. Nothing else means anything to him anymore. Everything he thought he felt for her, he abandons in search for his power. He's the same person as he was in the beginning of the film, just with new priorities. While in Italy, he chooses Apollina not out of his own lust, but instead to gain power over her father. And upon his return to the United States, his relationship with Kay continues to weaken.
Michael, why did you come here? Why?
She means less and less to him as a person. Everything that she thought she knew about him proved to be wrong because she never saw him with power.
But you're not like him, Michael. I thought you weren't going to become a man like your father.
Until Michael shuts her out of his life completely. This is why Michael becomes the villain of the story. Everything good that he stood for means nothing to him after he is introduced to power. However, although Michael is the protagonist of the story, he is far from the only focus of the film. I mean, there's a reason why Brando won Best Leading Actor while Pacino was just nominated for Supporting Actor. He's the protagonist, but not even the biggest focus of the film. I think that the biggest reason that so much attention is paid to Vito is that he serves to contrast Michael, a contrast which, by the way, is made much more clear in The Godfather Part II. Vito stresses the importance of family.
You spend time with your family?
Sure I do.
Good. Because a man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
And this is the exact opposite mentality that Michael has. I mentioned earlier that they are very similar in their approach, but they ultimately do it for different reasons. Michael has a care for his family, but he puts that care behind his own self-interest. He puts Kay over his blood family, and in the end puts his empire above Kay. He is searching for power and doesn't let anything get in the way of that. Another major contrast of the two characters is the idea of what it means to be a man. Outdated gender terms aside, whenever Vito discusses what it means to be a man,
You can act like a man!
he is referring to what it means to be a good person, with a high set of standards and an attitude that gives to others. He believes in nobility above all else. Even though he is part of a dirty world, he plays by clean rules.
But drugs is a dirty business.
What's especially stressed in the second film is that everything that Vito believes in is for his family. He wants power so that they don't have to live the same life that he endured. Michael, on the other hand, wants power only for his personal gain. He was exposed to the life that he can live and change his mentality. It was never about family because, after all, nothing he does is personal. It's all business.
But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed. Please pardon my voice, I'm getting over a little bit of a head cold, but wanted to make sure I got something up for you in the last week of the year. I love The Godfather, I watch it every year around this time, and felt that it was finally time to talk about this movie on its own. This video was made possible because of Patreon. If you want to help support the channel, that's the best way to do so. There's a link on screen right next to my last video on The Exorcist and the horrors of production. So check that out if you're interested, and I will see you next week.